Hey, lovely, let's get real for a moment. There comes a point in every budding connection where things start to heat up. The chemistry's there, the tension is building. Maybe it's late at night, the room is quiet, and you're both looking at each other like you know what's about to happen. And in that moment, it's so easy to just go with it, to get swept up in the attraction, the energy, the excitement of it all. But I want to pause you for a second, not to kill the moment, but to protect your peace. Because here's what no one tells you. Great sex doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts with emotional clarity. Too often we use physical intimacy to try to find emotional security. We think maybe if we get closer physically, he'll feel more connected. Or if I give this to him, maybe it'll turn into something more. But real confidence, real power comes from flipping that script. What if instead of using sex to create clarity, you created clarity before sex? What if you gave yourself permission to ask the questions that most people avoid, not because you're trying to scare him off, but because you respect yourself enough to be sure? Because here's the truth. The right man won't run away when you seek clarity. He won't panic when you ask for emotional honesty. In fact, a man who's actually ready for intimacy, not just sex, will lean in. He'll admire your self-respect. He'll recognize that you're not just someone he can sleep with. You're someone he should show up for. So this conversation isn't about setting traps or playing games. It's not about trying to lock him down or make things awkward. It's about you showing up as a woman who owns her worth, who honors her heart, and who isn't afraid to say, if you want access to my body, I deserve access to your truth. You have every right to ask for alignment, emotionally, mentally, and physically, before you give away the most intimate part of yourself. And when you do that, you don't just protect yourself from heartache, you invite in real connection. So before things move to the bedroom, here are 5 questions every woman should ask, not because you have to, but because you deserve to. Let's dive in. Let's start with what is arguably the most important question you can ask before sleeping with someone. What are you really looking for right now? Now, I want to be clear. This isn't about pressuring a guy into giving you a relationship. And it's not about trying to force a commitment just because there's chemistry between you. It's about something far more powerful than that. It's about protecting your peace and making sure your heart and body are being honored on the same level. So many people end up hurt after physical intimacy, not because they were vulnerable, but because they assumed there was shared meaning behind the connection, only to realize later they were playing 2 different games. Asking this question up front helps you skip the heartbreak that comes from hoping someone is on the same page. Instead, you get on the same page, or you walk away with your dignity fully intact. When you ask a man, what are you really looking for right now? You're not interrogating him, you're inviting him to be honest. And more importantly, you're giving yourself the information you need to make a conscious choice, not an emotional gamble. Let's say he says, honestly, I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm just having fun right now. That might sting if your heart is seeking connection, but that clarity is a gift. You don't have to waste your time trying to turn fun into forever. You can step away with grace, knowing that his path and yours just don't align. On the other hand, if he says something like, I want something meaningful, but I'm taking things slowly, you get to explore that further. What does meaningful mean to him? Does it match what you want? What does slowly look like? Does it feel emotionally safe for you? This question is also a test of maturity. If a man gets uncomfortable when you ask what he's looking for, or says something vague like, let's not overthink it, that's a huge red flag. Because if he can't handle a simple, respectful question about his own intentions, how will he handle deeper emotional conversations down the line? A man who's emotionally available won't just answer this question, he'll appreciate it. Why? Because it means you're a woman with clarity, a woman who's intentional with her heart, A woman who's not afraid to slow things down in the short term to avoid the wrong kind of pain in the long term. So don't shrink yourself to keep the vibe going. Don't stay silent because you're afraid he'll walk away. If someone walks away because you wanted clarity, they were never meant to stay. But the man who's truly aligned with you, he'll respect you more for asking. Because great relationships aren't built on confusion. They're built on courageous conversations. Let's talk about a question that goes far deeper than people expect. How do you usually handle intimacy? At first glance, it might sound clinical, a little heavy, maybe even unnecessary if the mood is playful, but I promise you this question is a game changer, because how someone navigates intimacy, not just sex, but the emotional energy around sex, says everything about how they'll show up with you. Here's why this matters. We all have a pattern, a rhythm, a way we subconsciously react to closeness, especially when it involves physical vulnerability. Some people feel more connected after sex. They lean in, they soften, they crave emotional presence. Others, whether they realize it or not, pull away. They retreat, they get distant, maybe even cold, not because they're bad people, but because they're not ready for the emotional weight that comes with intimacy. When you ask a man, how do you usually handle intimacy? You're not trying to psychoanalyze him. You're giving him space to reflect. You're inviting a moment of honesty, one that could spare you weeks or even months of confusion later. His answer will tell you if he's self-aware, if he understands his patterns, if he knows whether intimacy energizes him or scares him. And more importantly, it shows you how he's likely to treat you the morning after. Let's say he responds with something like, I usually feel really close after. I tend to want to spend more time together. That's useful information. But so is the opposite. If he says, to be honest, I sometimes feel overwhelmed or need space after being physical, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to run, but now you have context. You won't be left wondering why he went quiet. You'll know it's part of his pattern, not a reflection of your worth. And here's something important to remember. This question doesn't need to be heavy. It can be playful, intimate, vulnerable. You could even say, I've noticed people react differently after being close. Some get more attached, some get distant. I'm curious, what's your experience? It's about creating a safe space for real talk before bodies enter the equation. Because you deserve to know, does this man have the emotional capacity to navigate closeness with maturity? Or is he still confusing sex with connection and leaving people confused afterward? This is especially powerful if you've been burned in the past, if you've ever thought everything felt so real and then he just changed. That disconnection often comes from people who don't even realize how intimacy triggers them. But when you ask the question up front, you avoid being caught off guard by a disappearing act. You're not trying to prevent vulnerability. You're trying to make sure your vulnerability is respected, that your openness isn't followed by silence, that your body isn't held one night and ignored the next. So ask him, let him show you how he handles closeness. As if a man isn't emotionally prepared for intimacy, he's not prepared for you. Let's talk about a question that shifts the entire energy of the conversation and shows just how emotionally intelligent you really are. What makes you feel emotionally safe with someone? Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't that the kind of question I should be asking myself? And yes, it's incredibly important to know what you need to feel safe. But turning this question around and asking him, that's where real magic happens. Because here's the truth most people miss. A man doesn't connect deeply just because of great sex or because you get him or because the chemistry is hot. He connects when he feels like he can be himself, when he feels emotionally safe. And if he can't feel emotionally safe with you, he might stick around physically, but his heart will never truly show up. So when you ask a man what makes you feel emotionally safe, what you're really doing is inviting him to open a door. You're telling him, hey, I'm not just interested in what turns you on. I want to understand what makes you feel seen, heard, and valued. And that kind of question that stops a man in his tracks in the best way. It's disarming because it's not expected. Most people are focused on whether they feel safe, and rightly so. But by asking him, you're showing him something rare. You're emotionally tuned in. You care about connection, not just attention. You're not just trying to impress him, you're trying to understand him. Now, his answer to this question can reveal so much. If he says something like, I feel safe when I can talk without being judged, or I need someone who's patient when I open up, that tells you how he's wired. It also gives you insight into what kind of relationship he's capable of having. Can he name emotional needs? Can he recognize what makes him open up or shut down? And if he says, I've never really thought about that, or brushes it off like it's no big deal, that's a sign he might not be in touch with his own emotional world. And if a man doesn't know what makes him feel emotionally safe, how is he going to help you feel that way? Here's the kicker. This question also opens up a two-way street, because the moment he answers, he's going to turn around and ask you. And when you share what safety looks like for you, whether it's honesty, consistency, emotional presence, you're setting a beautiful tone for intimacy that's not just physical, but foundational. Asking about emotional safety isn't soft. It's not too much. It's powerful. It says, I don't just want to be desired. I want to be respected, and I want to do the same for you. That's not a demand. That's a standard. And that standard, it's sexy, because it shows you're a woman who doesn't just want the moment. You want meaning behind it. Now, this next question, it's one of the bravest and one of the most overlooked questions you can ever ask before sleeping with someone. How would we handle things if we decided this wasn't working? I know, it sounds like the world's biggest mood killer. You're in a romantic or intimate moment, there's a spark in the air, and suddenly you're talking about things not working out. But let me tell you something powerful. A relationship worth having is one that can withstand uncomfortable honesty. And a man worth your energy is someone who can talk about how he'll treat you, even if things don't go the way either of you imagined. Because here's the thing, anyone can be amazing when things are going well. When it's fun, easy, exciting, people show up as their best selves. But when emotions shift, when feelings fade, when someone starts to pull away, that's when a person's true character comes out. And that's exactly what this question helps you understand. How will he show up if the situation changes? It's not about being pessimistic, it's about being prepared. It's about protecting your emotional safety by knowing who you're opening yourself up to. This question's really saying, can we be adults about this? Can we have respect and kindness as the foundation, even if the outcome isn't what we expected? And let's be honest, sex can complicate things. For one person, it might be a deep bonding experience. For the other, it might have felt more casual. And if there's no communication ahead of time, that's how people get hurt. So when you ask this question, listen carefully to how he responds, not just what he says. If he brushes it off with, why are you thinking about that right now? Or let's just enjoy the moment, that tells you something. He may not be willing or capable of handling deeper emotional responsibility. But if he says something like, I think the best way is with honesty and compassion, or I'd want to have a conversation if either of us felt differently, that shows you he's emotionally accountable, that he's not just in this for himself, he actually considers the impact his actions might have on you. The truth is, it takes courage to ask this question, because part of us is afraid of hearing an answer that might make us walk away. But here's what's more painful than asking this question: not asking it and then finding out the hard way. You deserve to be with someone who treats you with care, not just in the heat of the moment, but in the clarity of the aftermath. You deserve someone who's not afraid to talk about both connection and consequences. Because when a man respects you enough to answer this question honestly, that's not a turnoff, that's a green flag. That's a man showing you, even if I don't stay in your life forever, I will not leave you confused, ghosted, or disrespected. And that, lovely, is the kind of man you want to share yourself with. Let's talk about a question that might seem small, even casual, but reveals something absolutely crucial. Are you the kind of person who communicates after sex? Now, I know, at first glance, this can feel like a throwaway question, almost like you're just checking for some polite follow-up behavior. But let's get real. We both know this isn't about texting the next morning just to say, last night was fun. It's about how a man emotionally shows up after intimacy. Because what hurts more than anything else after sex, especially for someone who opened themselves up, trusted, connected, and let go, is silence. That awkward feeling, when the emotional energy suddenly drops, when someone goes from being all over you one night to disappearing the next. That whiplash can leave you questioning your worth, your judgment, and whether any of it meant anything at all. That's why this question is so important. When you ask, are you the kind of person who communicates after sex? What you're really asking is, do you treat physical connection as something that deserves emotional responsibility? And let's be honest, a lot of people don't. A lot of people treat sex like a moment, something that starts and ends in the bedroom. But for someone who values deep connection, and I know that's you, sex is never just a moment. It's an experience. It's energy exchanged, and it deserves to be acknowledged, not ignored. When you ask this, you're not demanding anything. You're not saying you have to text me 24/7 or commit to forever. You're simply gauging his level of emotional follow-through. Here's what to pay attention to. If he gets awkward, avoids the question, or says something like, I don't really like expectations, that tells you what you need to know. He's probably used to keeping emotional distance and doesn't want to be responsible for what his intimacy creates. And that is not someone you want to hand your heart or your body to. But if he says, yeah, I think it's important to check in, or I try to stay connected and not just disappear. Now you're seeing a man who understands emotional maturity, a man who doesn't see communication as an obligation, but as respect for the time you shared, respect for the intimacy that took place. And most importantly, respect for you. Because here's the hard truth. Silence after sex is communication. It communicates exactly how someone sees you. And asking this question up front protects you from having to read between the lines later. It gives you a preview of whether he's going to ghost, breadcrumb, or actually continue showing up as someone who values connection beyond the physical. So don't be afraid to ask. Not because you're insecure or needy, but because you're self-aware. And you know that sex without communication is a transaction. But sex with communication, that's where connection lives. That's where trust grows. And that's where you thrive. So let's bring it all together. You are not too much for asking deeper questions. You're not ruining the mood. You're not pushing him away. What you are doing is setting a powerful standard. A standard that says, my body is not separate from my heart. If you want access to one, you need to respect the other. These 5 questions, what are you really looking for right now? How do you usually handle intimacy? What makes you feel emotionally safe? How would we handle things if this wasn't working? Are you someone who communicates after sex? These aren't just conversation starters, they're clarity creators. They help you see whether the person in front of you is capable of meeting you where you are, emotionally, mentally, and energetically. Because here's the truth, the sex isn't the risk. The risk is giving your vulnerability to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. The risk is assuming meaning when there was none. The risk is choosing connection when they only chose a moment. You are allowed to want depth. You're allowed to want more than just physical chemistry. And any man who is worth being intimate with, who truly wants to connect with you, not just your body, won't be turned off by these questions. He'll lean in. He'll respect you for them. And if he gets uncomfortable, if he disappears after you ask them, that's your answer right there. That's not rejection. That's redirection, saving you from weeks or months of confusion, overthinking, or emotional disappointment. So the next time you find yourself in a moment where things could turn physical, remember this: you don't need to earn connection with your body. You don't need to perform emotional silence to seem cool. And you never have to sacrifice your standards to keep someone's interest. Ask the questions, get the answers, and only move forward when it feels aligned, not rushed, not confusing, but grounded and clear. Because great sex isn't about the physical alone. It's about safety. It's about presence. And it's about being seen and respected in your entirety. And that is the kind of intimacy you deserve.